Hey everyone, we are live. We're happy to be here today. It is Student Visa Week at Argo Visa, and today Mandy and I are going to be doing a live Q&A, answering as many questions as we can from visa applicants like you who are going through this process, who are getting ready to study in America. We know that you have questions. We know that each of you has a unique situation and you want to get an answer to your question. So we're going to get through as many as we can. I'll introduce myself first in case no one has seen me before. My name is Ben. I'm the Director of Consular Affairs at Argo, and I'm a former visa officer. I worked for the State Department doing 60,000 visas over the course of my career, doing visas in China and in Colombia, and visas of every single type imaginable. Mandy?
Yeah, it's really exciting to be here with you guys. Thanks for spending time with us. We look forward to answering your questions. I, just like Ben, am a former U.S. diplomat and visa officer and also a U.S. immigration attorney. I've interviewed about 100,000 visa applicants in my time in China and Mexico and Hong Kong. And again, we've seen pretty much every single type of visa you can imagine, dealt with a lot of prior refusals, and look forward to sharing some tips and insights, especially for this student visa season. And we wish you the best for a smooth process as you go in and apply for your U.S. visa, and hope we can help.
Great. So let's start taking some questions. Okay, Suk tells us, please tell me how to answer this question. Who is your sponsor? Should we talk about the sponsor's occupation, income, and all that stuff?
Yeah, so this is a great question. If you do have a sponsor, so funding is a big part of the student visa interview. So if you are going as a student, you're going to have to explain to the visa officer how you plan to pay for your tuition and living expenses. And oftentimes you do have a sponsor. If you have a sponsor, it is important to have context for the visa officer so they understand the relationship between you and the sponsor. Because really what you're trying to do is you're trying to paint a picture for the visa officer so that they can understand why this person would pay money out of their own pocket for your tuition or living expenses. And keep in mind that sometimes there could be a little bit of cultural difference. So, for an American officer, it's possible that their parents would pay for their tuition, but an aunt and an uncle might seem strange. So it might be very helpful for you to explain this relationship between yourself and your distant family member as to why this person would do such a thing for you.
And the question, who's your sponsor? The question behind the question is, why should I give you the visa, right? And so when they're asking this, they're wondering about your finances. The question isn't just about, tell me about that one person who you listed as your sponsor on your I-20 or on your DS-160. The question is, tell me about your whole financial situation. So don't limit your answer to talking about one person. Talk about everything. If it's your savings, your parents' savings, your families, your extended families, give them all the information that could possibly help them get to the decision to issue your visa. All right, great. Let's move on to another question here. Sujay says, in my passport, my place of birth is given by my town's name and not by the city's name it's located in. In the DS-160, when it asks for the city of birth, is it okay if I give the city's name?
I think
the
that's
answer
fine.
to that is simply yes. Yeah, you can put your town's name or your city's name. I don't know why you would want to put the city's name instead of the town's name. But if the in your passport it's listed as your town, you should put your town's name. The DS-160, there's some information in the DS-160 that's extremely important. Your education history, your employment history, your prior travel, the answers to some questions about have you been refused a visa before, to show that you're being very honest. Other information can be changed. Like, for instance, if your name is listed in a different order in your passport than it is on the DS-160, they got the two middle names swapped or something like that. That's not a big deal. When you get to the embassy or the consulate, when you get to the intake window with the local staff member who's going to be putting your information into the system, just let them know about this change, show them in your passport how it should be, and they'll change that for you there. That's not a big deal. Okay, let's move on to another question here. I am applying for an F1 visa from India this year. I went to Singapore as a tourist in 2009. Can I mention this on the DS-160, though it only asks for the past 5 years of travel history?
I would just answer the question the way that it's posed. So just mention where you've traveled in the last 5 years. This is not really going to be all that important, whether or not you put it in or not. But I would always try to answer those questions as truthfully as possible. So if it says last 5 years, just only mention the travels in your last 5 years.
Right. You never want to appear like you're being dishonest on your DS-160 or on any of your documents, right? The appearance of being very open and honest can do a lot to help you establish that rapport with the visa officer. And when the visa officer trusts you, the data points and the answers to the questions are not as important as that feeling of trust that they have when they're talking to you during the interview. Okay. So now we have a question here from Sarayo. Hello, a week ago I was rejected a second time from a bachelor's. I'm a student studying in Poland. 2 years, after 1 year, I will graduate. What do you think? Can I reapply again, or should I try for a master's degree? So here we've got a prior refusal, applying for, it looks like a second bachelor's degree, or would you need to go for a master's degree? So I think we're talking about non-traditional students here, right, Mandy?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think of this situation, Ben?
Well, I would want to know what happened during those refusals. That's really key for interpreting what was going on in the visa officer's mind, and what's in their mind then goes into their notes, right? And that's what the next visa officer is going to see, and it's going to shape the interview from the very beginning, what happened in that previous interview. So seeing what their concerns were, right? It could be that it was going for a second bachelor's degree, and they just don't understand why you would want to go for a second bachelor's degree. Who knows? Maybe it had to do with funding. Whatever that is, there is a way to try to address that in another interview. Because if you've gone into your interviews and you haven't really advocated for yourself and put your highlights out there, then you can get your visa issued again if you go in. Now, maybe there is something insurmountable, and it would be better to apply for a master's, strengthen that application by going for a higher degree, getting into a better school. There's always that option too of improving your resume. But I wouldn't say that this is an automatic application that you need to give up on yet without knowing the full details.
Yeah. And I think Ben brings up a really good point, which is when you get denied a visa, 99% of the time, the visa officer is not going to tell you why you were denied a visa. And you might think you know, but you really don't know. Because what a visa officer does is look at your full life situation and circumstances, and then they will decide, looking at weighing multiple factors. So don't assume you know why you're refused. And if you have been refused, definitely work with an expert to find out why you're refused. That's going to be the starting point for how you can get that situation turned around. Because if you don't even know and you just go in doing exactly the same thing you did the last time, you will probably get the same result, which is another denial. And once you get a number of denials, it becomes really difficult to come back from that and actually get that visa approved. So it goes into your visa record forever. It's a very high stakes interview. So again, if you have a prior denial, definitely work with an expert. You don't have to do this on your own and take wild guesses as to why it happened. We can tell you to a very high level of certainty why you were denied and how we can help and give you a strategy.
Okay, we have another question here from Win. Hello, Argo. I'm a 23-year-old Chinese girl who just got rejected for an F1 visa yesterday. The officer said he can't give me a specific reason for the refusal. What would you suggest that I do the next time? Well, Mandy and I have both served in China. Mandy in Beijing and me in Guangzhou and Shanghai. And so we have a lot of experience in this. There's no specific advice for someone that's been refused. This is the same thing. China, though, has a very high approval rate for bona fide students. There's certain places where there's known high fraud, and that can cause the officers to be very cautious when issuing visas to people who come from areas where there's a lot of illegal immigration from China to the US. But in general, if you're able to show that you've got the means, the academic credentials, you can get your visa issued. Now, Mandy and I have also seen that in the last year, the visa officers in China seem to be less confident, and it's because of the pandemic. The pandemic made shut down all their interviews. They didn't do interviews for 2 years. So what that meant was that they weren't gaining that experience, and with experience comes confidence. They're lacking that. And so right now what's happening is that they see situations that maybe are atypical, that give them pause, and they're more likely to refuse now than they would have been before. But that doesn't mean that the route is closed to you. If you apply again and you know what you can do better the next time, you know what your highlights are, you do have a chance to get your visa issued again.
That's absolutely right, Ben. And I think, again, this is a situation where your first step is to book an Argo consultation so you can find out exactly why you were refused. And we can usually figure that out from the questions you were asked, what your answers were, what the visa officer's concerns were. And then we can give you a strategy on how to get that situation turned around so you can see if you can do better at your next interview.
Okay, let's go for this question from Ishmael. Hello, I got denied twice on my F visa and I'm going to apply again. May I know what I should say on the DS-160 where it asks, what's the reason that I got denied?
That is a great question. And I think, it's good to just keep it short, in my opinion. So you can just say, I was denied a visa. Honestly, sometimes that's enough. I was denied a visa at this time, because honestly, the visa officers know that you don't really know the reason why you were denied. I have seen visa applicants give these very long-winded explanations for, okay, well, this has happened. And the visa officer, usually that is better for you to explain in person what concerns the visa officer had that caused you to get your visa denied. It's better to do that in person versus on the application. So for this question, I would recommend that you just put something very simple about, your denial and when it happened. You don't actually have to give a specific reason, because that is what you're going to go into at your next interview when you're actually having this conversation with the visa officer.
That is a very good point. Let's move on to another question. Does the university matter in a visa interview? It absolutely does. Obviously, if a university can give you an I-20, they are a legitimate university that is able to offer student spots and sponsor student visas, but that doesn't mean that they're all equal in the eyes of the visa officer. And what it really boils down to is how strict the admission standards are. If you don't have to have any credentials, if anyone can be admitted to a program, let's say it's an English language program or a community college program where they have a near 100% acceptance rate, that's not going to tell the visa officer anything. That's going to tell them all you did was go online and submit an application and you were accepted, right? Now let's go on the far other end of the spectrum. If you were accepted by Harvard or Yale or one of the most prestigious universities in the country, the visa officer knows, okay, a very prestigious organization, this university, has already vetted this applicant and has already confirmed that this applicant's academic credentials are up to their standard, which is a very high standard. It takes years and years of academic excellence and effort to get to that standard. And so the visa officer already knows, okay, this applicant has already proven their academic credentials. Now all I'm concerned about is anything else, okay, the finances, how's it going to be paid for? But they don't doubt that you're a legit student. So yes, the university does matter. Now, that matters on those extreme ends, a prestigious university and a university that has very lax admittance requirements. If there's, let's say, the University of Michigan versus the University of Ohio, these are both excellent universities. And if you're refused when you applied for the University of Michigan, changing your application to the University of Ohio is not going to help you, right? The visa officer, and just to be very clear with you, this is how it is and this is how you need to view it. The visa officer did not refuse the university. The visa officer refused you, right? So changing the university, a lateral change is not really going to help you that much. Going to a much better university can help you, but also demonstrating all your credentials and why they should trust you is going to help you. It's not because, students can't get visas to go to the University of Tennessee, so I need to apply to the University of Arkansas. That's not the way that it works.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I would say that, just make sure that you are prepared for the interview, and know that if you are going to a community college or for an ESL program or a school that is less well known, that you need to be prepared for probably a tougher interview, because the visa officer is taking it upon themselves to vet you and make sure they are actually qualified as a student.
Yes, exactly. So we have another question here. Is having an aunt in the US reducing my chances of getting the US visa? Basically, we can boil this down to anyone that has a similar question. If I have family members in the US, will that affect my chances? And the answer is always yes. Now, it doesn't have to be a negative, but this is something that the visa officers are trained to look for, right? There's a field on that DS-160 where they ask if you have any family members in the US, and that's immediate family members. If your sponsor is someone who's a family member who's in the US and you do state that in your application, they're going to know this. Why this is important is because it shows a tie to the US. You've probably all read on the internet and maybe heard in your own visa interviews, ties. You have to have ties to your home country, or you have too many ties to the US. This is basically just kind of a technical way of them saying, where are you more likely to settle down, to be drawn to start your life and your career, right? If you've got your entire family in the US, well, that's a big incentive to try to stay in the US. But if your family is all in your home country, then you have more of ties to your home country. So having that aunt there could be seen as a negative. So you can't expect that you can go in there and just say, yes, my aunt is in the US, and then say no more, because the visa officer's imagination is going to be going in every direction, considering every single scenario, and usually the negative ones that would lead you to want to stay in the US permanently, right? You need to follow up and let them know exactly what this situation is, right? What they're doing in the US, are they there legally? Did they arrive legally? What was their immigration path, etc.?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Anything that is something out of the ordinary that they're seeing will increase your chances of getting denied a visa. So again, any family in the US, it's definitely something that you will want to talk about in a very credible way. And I have seen this be, generally it's a negative factor, but you can maybe even turn it into a positive factor depending on how well prepared you are for the interview, what your relationship with this aunt is. Are you planning to see her when you're in the United States? All of this is about engaging with the visa officer the right way and how you explain it, which is why I think for so many of you, you may have heard of people with very similar situations, and one visa applicant will get approved, one will get denied. A lot of it has to do with their preparation for the visa interview, how they explain and advocate for themselves. And that's exactly what we do at Argo Visa in helping you prepare for this important interview.
Okay, we have another question here. I would like to know how strict a consul is for an F1 interview for a fully funded PhD at the University of Florida. Mandy, I'll let you take this one.
Okay. I think that if you are, getting a graduate school degree in the United States, especially a PhD, that is a very positive factor in your favor. It means clearly you are, you have a lot going for you. You are doing extensive research. And so, however, it doesn't mean that the visa process is going to be a rubber stamp for you. It hardly ever is for anyone. So again, if we're just looking at this one factor, that's positive. But Jose, I don't know everything about your personal life. I don't know, do you have family in the United States? Has anybody petitioned for an immigrant visa for you? Are you in love with an American citizen? So these are all things that we need to know about your life to make an accurate assessment for how tough your visa interview will be. I will say though, for just this factor, if you're a fully funded PhD, you probably have a good chance, barring other sort of complicated situations. But again, you know your situation best. If any other complications, affect your case or apply to your case, please book a consultation. It is better to be well prepared than to get to the interview and realize that you actually had red flags in your case that you could have been prepared for.
Okay, is the process for PhD students fully funded easier than masters? And I'll just give you a very simple answer to this. Yes, it's easier. The greater the prestige of what you're doing, the easier it's going to be to get approved. So a PhD is more prestigious than a master's. It requires more work. It requires more commitment, more dedication. The requirements for being accepted, and especially to a fully funded program, are more strict. So yes, it is always going to be seen like you are a more qualified student if you're going for a PhD program rather than a master's program. Okay, let's go for another question here. So this is something we touched on earlier, but we can talk about it in terms of being a non-traditional student. So Mandy, what are the chances of getting a second F1 visa for a second master's? So I'm assuming that they already did one master's in the US on an F1, and now they're going for a second master's.
This is a really great question because we see a lot of international students in this situation. And I think the crux of what's going to happen at this next visa interview is being able to adequately explain why this master's degree differs from the first one and what changes in your circumstances have caused you to need a second master's degree. I think for a lot of students, they think, well, I've already been a good student. I'm just, doing this thing, and you assume that the visa officer will already know or will just go ahead and approve your case. But in fact, the visa officer will be very inquisitive and want to know why another master's degree? You already have one. So does this make sense for your career trajectory? Does this make sense for what you're intending to do in the future? So I would highly recommend that you think about what your future plans are and how the second master's degree fits into those plans so that you can prepare a well-rounded response for the visa officer.
All right, let's go on to another question here. Good day, Ben. Oh, okay, question for me. Is it okay for me to state to the visa officer that I'm choosing a particular university because of its low cost of attendance? The answer to that is yes. Now, before I get into why that's a good answer, you might think it's a bad answer because it shows, oh, I'm going for a cheap program because, maybe, we don't have a ton of funds, but this is something that my family can afford. But here's the thing that you should consider is that the visa officer that you are doing your interview with also went to university. I'd say 99% of them went to the university in the US, right? And they took into consideration the same factors that you're taking into consideration when you choose which university you're going to, right? Now, what are those considerations? The cost, for sure. Did you get a scholarship or any other type of funding, a graduate assistantship, something like that? 100% they're going to consider that. The major, the program, is it a prestigious program at that university, right? If you're at a higher level of study, let's say master's and PhD, who's the professor? What type of research are they engaged in, right? Other extrinsic factors like, do you have people that you know that went to that school and recommended it to you, and that's why you've heard that it's good, right? Maybe your family has friends that live there, and because you've never lived alone before, they want you to be close to somebody who can help you out in a new country. All of these are very practical reasons, and in the US, students are considering the same types of things. So giving a real reason like this and talking about it, not just saying, I chose this university because of low cost. No, tell them a story, right? It's pretend like you're speaking to your cousin and you're talking about why you made this decision, right? You're going to give them the whole narrative, the whole background. That's what the visa officer needs to hear. They need to hear what your thinking process was, because that shows that you're actually intending to go to university there. There was a real decision process that took place. Now, the opposite of that, I'm going to give you what a bad reason for you to give. And that's what we heard so many students do when we were visa officers. They give these memorized answers that have nothing to do with them and are just facts that they've memorized from the university's website or maybe a Wikipedia article saying, I want to go to the University of Kansas because it has a very good student to faculty ratio. They have a campus of 130 acres and they have a $1.7 million endowment for the laboratories. Some answer like that, which is not the way that American students choose the universities that they're going to attend. It's also not the way that we know that you choose the university you're going to attend. So giving one of those memorized, bland, generic answers is never going to benefit you. Always the practical answer that's personal to you is what you need to be answering when they ask you that question.
And I will just add one thing to Ben's answer, which I think is a very good answer, is that if one of the reasons why you chose a particular university is because it's low cost, you should still probably work with an expert to make sure that you are presenting the situation the right way. Because anytime you talk about low cost or some special reasons for funding, it could be taken badly, and it's a very risky sort of response to give. Again, just like Ben said, you want to flesh out your answer, and whether or not it's good enough, you're never going to know. But what we can do is tell you, okay, that was a great response. That was a very well-rounded response, highlighting this specific reason. And so don't think that just because we say it's okay to mention that it's low cost, that, you can just say it and it'll be accepted well. There is going to be importance placed on your response, and you should be prepared.
Okay, how much information is too much information? I know you encourage more than one sentence or one word answers, but I don't want to say too much. Mandy?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I think oftentimes people give too much information. And this is why it's important to strike a good balance. You don't want to give one word answers, but you also don't want to ramble on and on, providing a lot of information that is irrelevant, that will just cause the visa officer to tune you out, to not have a very good impression of you and think, okay, I'm never going to get the right information out of this person. I'm just going to go ahead and deny the visa. Keep in mind that it is always easier for the visa officer to deny your visa than it is for them to actually take the time to understand your situation fully and give you a chance. So definitely you can give too much information. I would say a good balance is finding, 2 or 3 sentences very concisely explaining your situation, always bringing the positive aspects of your case to the forefront of the mind of the visa officer. And we can give you good feedback on what is relevant and not relevant.
Okay, let's move on to another question here. Kenny says, I was denied earlier. I don't know why, but I attended the interview about 2 weeks after the start date. Okay, so this is very key, and this is very simple for everyone. You must be able to get to the US before your program start date as it is listed on your I-20. That means that your visa interview needs to be before that start date. Not just before it by 1 day, it needs to be before it by at least a week. And that's going to involve also asking them to expedite the printing, preferably by 2 or 3 weeks, because they're going to look at that and they need to know that they can approve your visa, wait for all the clearances to come through, print your visa, and return it to you with enough time for you to then get on a plane and fly to the US to get to your program, right? So if you arrive after your program start date is passed, you're done, you're toast. They're not going to even consider it. If you arrive with just a few days, maybe you'll be able to convince them to do you a favor, and they will consider it a favor to expedite everything, but maybe they won't. Maybe they'll say, no, there's not enough time for you to get to the US, and so they're going to refuse it. But yeah, this is something that there's nothing that can be done about it. Everyone should know it's very clear. They cannot issue your visa after your program has already begun. Okay, let's move on to another question from Tanya. Does the number of universities that a student applies to and the number of admittances affect whether they get the visa or not? Mandy?
I would say it could. You don't have to go crazy and just say, okay, I'm going to apply to 20 universities in hopes that this number is important and the more I get, the better. I think this is important if you're only applying to one university, which I know is true for some of you. Then you have to have a very good reason for why that specific university, if you're going all the way across the world to attend a school in the United States. And this also has to do with an American visa officer's personal history with applying to schools. Most Americans don't apply to just one school. They apply to a number, they shortlist, and then they pick the one that they want to go to. So if you're someone going to just one school, you'll want to be extra prepared in responding to why that one school. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you have to apply to as many as possible. I think there's no magic number, but whatever makes sense for your personal situation is the right way to go.
Okay, let's move on to another question here. How to prove strong ties to your home if your parents don't own land or businesses, right? Your funding, however, does come from a graduate assistantship. So this is key. They don't just give visas to affluent people, to people from rich families abroad, okay? Now, that does help, 100%. We need to be honest about that. If your family does have money, that shows the visa officer that you are less likely to stay in the US unlawfully, right? You won't have employment authorization. The work that you'd be able to engage in is usually low wage, low skilled work when you don't have any official status in the US. And being from a family that does have means makes them more likely to think that that's not something that you would engage in, right? Now, on the other hand, the US, the values that the US visa officers hold are equality, equal opportunity, being able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, make yourself into something from nothing. So they are not going to just discriminate against you if your family doesn't have means. It will affect their thinking, though. They 100% will consider it, but they want somebody who's coming from no means to be able to succeed and excel in their academic career. So if your family does not have the resources that are not going to be enough to convince the visa officer, well, then that's not what you need to focus on. That's not one of your highlights. That's actually one of your hurdles. You need to recognize that your highlights are that you are a strong enough student that you got a graduate assistantship that's funding you to attend this program, right? So some students, maybe they want to focus on their parents' income or salary or their businesses. You, in this case, need to focus on your academics, your strong academics, your commitment to academic excellence, how well you've done in every academic program that you've been in your life, any awards you've won, things like that. That's what you need to show. Because if you're showing, look how good of a student I am, right? The best indicator of future behavior is prior behavior. So if you're showing them, look, all the way up until now, I have been a top-notch student, they're more likely to believe that from now on, you're also going to be a top-notch student. So you just got to know what your highlights are and focus on those and know how to defend against your disadvantages, your hurdles, if you are questioned about those in your visa interview. Okay. Mandy, another China question. There are 5 US consulates plus the embassy in China. I want to know if the location of the embassy plays a role in the approval or denial of an F1 visa.
Wow, that is a great question and kind of a loaded question. So if you are someone who's applying for a visa, we always recommend that you apply in your home consular district. Okay, so there is a specific consulate or embassy assigned to you, and that's where you should apply. However, there is, rumors out there that, okay, certain embassies or certain consulates are easier than others. It doesn't really matter. You should apply where your home consular district is. So for example, in China, if you live right outside of Shanghai, that's where you should be applying for your visa, unless you have a good reason to apply elsewhere. And the reason why I answer it like this is because it's kind of a slippery slope. If you think that one consulate is easier, quote unquote, easier for getting your visa, and you try to just apply there, yes, you are technically allowed to do so. But what the visa officer is going to see or assume when looking at your case is, wow, this person came all the way over to Shanghai from Shenyang because they think that it's going to be an easier place for them to get their visa approved. I'm going to show them how they're wrong. And so there is this concept amongst visa officers of applicants visa shopping. So you always want to start with your home consulate. However, sometimes if you have a good reason, perhaps, you were born right outside of Shanghai, but you have been in Beijing attending university for the past 4 years and you actually reside in Beijing, then that would be considered an okay reason to apply in Beijing versus Shanghai. And I don't know if you have anything to add, Ben.
Yeah, well, with China specifically, right, just last week, or maybe it was the week before, the consulate in Shanghai went on ordered departure, and so they're not going to be doing visa interviews there for a while. Even once they open back up, it's still going to take them a while to ramp up. So probably even if you're from Suzhou or somewhere around there, you're going to want to go to a different consulate or embassy now where you have to. But yeah, what Mandy said is exactly right. The way you should think about it is like this: there's no consulate or embassy that's going to be easier for you just because people say it's easier. People say, oh, embassy X is easier than embassy Y. That's not true for you. For you, Well, the embassy that's going to be the closest one to you, where they're going to know why you are there. That's going to be the easy one. To use China as the example, if you're from Guangzhou, lived your whole life in Guangzhou, went to university in Guangzhou, and then you show up in Shenyang for your visa interview, they're going to think, why is this person from Guangzhou up here in Shenyang, right? They don't know anything about Guangzhou. But let's say that you're born in Guangzhou, you went to elementary school in Guangzhou, you went to college in Guangzhou, but then you got a job and you've been working for 2 years in Shenyang. Then yes, you can apply in Shenyang, because why are you there? You have a job, you have a reason to be there, right? And it's intuitively understandable. So it's all about thinking about, that visa officer needs to think, yes, I belong here, right? And you need to help them understand why you belong there. You can give them those reasons that tell them why you do belong there. Okay, let's go on to another question. If I lived all my life in a country that isn't my nationality, is this country considered my home country? So let's say, for example, someone who's from India, who's lived their entire life in Dubai, for instance, Mandy.
Yeah, I would say yes, but you're going to have to explain that to the visa officer. It's not going to be immediately apparent to them, because the first thing they're going to see is your passport, and they're going to assume, okay, this is where they live. So you're going to have to want to weave that into your story about, why you have lived in Dubai your whole life. And that's going to become a part of your narrative, depending on the type of visa you're applying for. And what you would want to do is have a strategy where, it makes sense. And so basically, keep in mind that this is not something automatically known to the visa officer, and you will have to explain it.
Okay, let's move on. Hello, I have a 7-year gap between finishing high school and going to undergrad. How's that going to affect your application? So this is one of these situations that we, as visa officers, consider a non-traditional student. A traditional student is one where there's no gaps to fill in. There's no questions about what's going on. It's high school to college to grad degree to PhD, right? And especially that undergrad to grad degree to PhD, it's all in the same field. Anything where you're going to see a change of field, that's not traditional. Anything where you have a gap between studies, where you worked for a few years in between, that's non-traditional. Anything where you're going to repeat the same level. You've got one master's and you're going to go back for another master's, or drop down and get a bachelor's after having gotten a master's. These are all non-traditional situations. And what that means is that it's a specific situation to you. There are going to be details that you need to explain to the visa officer so that they feel confident about your situation. Okay. A student that's just, high school, undergrad, grad school, there's no explanation needed. This is just a student on their academic career path. When you have a 7-year gap, though, between high school and college, you were doing something, right? And now it makes sense to go back and get your college degree. What's that reason, right? Because not everyone does it. That's why you can't, if you're a non-traditional student, you 100% cannot go in there and give short answers and give no information. The students that are on a traditional path, it's a little bit more acceptable for them to be passive in their interview, because it's more likely that the visa officer is going to imagine a very conventional academic career path. But if you have an unconventional one, the visa officer's imagination is going to be going wild. If you don't fill in the gaps for them, they're going to fill it in, and not necessarily with good information. So you've got to let them know what happened. What have you been doing for the last 7 years? Why now do you want to make the change and go back and stop working, stop your career, make a hard turn and pay money for a degree that's going to put you on a different track, right? So the key in this situation is you've got to tell them the story about how this came about, why you're making this decision, why does it make sense for you, why is it going to be better for you afterwards? Not just, oh, I want to learn, right? Students who are traditional students who are younger, they can just say, oh, I just want to learn. I'm interested in this. If you're mid-career and you're making a change, it can't just be because you want to learn. It has to be because it makes sense for your career, for your income, for your profession, for your prospects, right? There's got to be some real tangible benefit to you. Okay, Elismir Choi says, I reapplied for an F1 after one refusal, but the VO started and his colleague came to him and said that I'd been denied last week, and so there was no need to interview. Why is this? And we'll get to the second part of the question afterwards.
So, Ellesmere, I'm so sorry that this was your experience. Unfortunately, things like this happen every now and then. That is not the normal way that these officers handle cases like this. So, it probably was a mistake. If you have been denied a visa before, you should be getting a what they call a fresh look at your application, which means that you should be interviewing with a different visa officer, which is what it sounds like happened to you. It's likely what happened in this situation is that the colleague came to him was the officer who previously denied you, and he should not have done that. So again, I'm sorry that this was your experience. You should be given the opportunity to interview again and get a fresh look in your situation. And so I would say we can help. And actually, we have an officer who speaks Cantonese. And so, if you need our help, we'd be happy to provide it.
Okay, let's move on here. My sister is in the USA and she is on an H4. Should I mention it on my DS-160? Absolutely, you should. The question is, do you have any immediate family members in the US? And if you do not state that, well, think about it. You're interviewing with a visa officer. Your sister who's in the US on an H4 also interviewed with a visa officer. They have access to those same records. They can verify that your sister is in the US with a few clicks of a mouse. And then if you've not listed that, even if it was innocent, it's going to appear like you were trying to hide that fact. And that's not going to look good. So you do need to list that. And also, if she's on an H4, she's the spouse of somebody that holds another type of H visa. Let's assume that's an H1B. You have to have very high qualifications to get an H1B. This is not, kind of like a low wage, unskilled job. And so that means that you've got family members who have these types of credentials that can qualify for an H1B visa. So you're showing that your family is of a certain, status in terms of education level and income level. That can work to your benefit. Okay. So listing that is a must, but also explaining it in a way that paints you and your family in the right light. That's going to be really important to you. Okay. Why the embassy is not releasing slots for previously refused students? How long are they going to make us wait? The reason for this is because of the pandemic, they have gotten very behind in their visa interviews. They have long wait times, and they've made the decision to prioritize first-time applicants instead of letting applicants who have been refused apply multiple times. And that's why they're giving the priority to new. They're not just saying you can't apply. They're saying we need to give that slot to someone who hasn't even had a first chance to apply yet. And that's why some posts around the world, this is not worldwide, but some posts around the world are not allowing recently refused visa applicants to apply again. There is an option, which is to apply in another country where they will give you a visa appointment. You can do this, however, it's risky. It's risky to apply in another country at any point other than the one where you actually reside and have a reason to be there. It's even riskier if you've been denied in your own country and now you're showing up abroad, because they're going to think, okay, well, the visa officers in country X know about your situation because you are a citizen of country X and they refused you. Who am I, someone who does visa interviews in country Y? Who am I to then say that I know more than people in country X, right? So you can try this. It is kind of a last resort. Your chances are lower. You do need to be very well prepared. This is the type of interview where if you don't go in there ready to advocate for yourself and tell your story, that you're not going to get much consideration at all. So you've got to be extremely well prepared for one of these types of interviews. Okay, Mandy, please, what do I reply when they asked why I switched from nursing to economics as an undergraduate? Because my work experience is as a financial assistant. So basically, like a career change, a change of major or discipline.
So I would say, take the strategy of what would you say to a friend if they were to ask you, hey, you used to be studying nursing and now all of a sudden you're studying economics. Like, what are your reasons? And this is because you really want to get to the root of why you're doing this change and give your own authentic reason. instead of something that's just memorized or you think that there is a right response. There's really no right response, but there is the right response for you, depending on what your personal circumstances are. So I would say in this situation, just imagine what you would be telling someone, not a government official, but telling your friend, and so you can explain exactly what happened. I'm imagining, just from the circumstances that you mentioned, that you had some work experience as a financial assistant. You got really interested in finance, and that's why you made the career change, but that might not be why. And so what we would love to hear from you, and if you were to do an Argo consultation, is I would want to know why you made that change and how can we phrase it in a way that makes sense to the visa officer.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on here. So, can we ask the visa officer why we were refused? You can try. They most likely are not going to give you a satisfactory answer. And the reason for that, well, there's multiple reasons for that. One reason is because once they've made that decision, they're done thinking about your case, right? So being very passive in your interview and just giving one-word answers, and then they say, I'm sorry, I can't issue your visa. And then trying to say, oh no, but I didn't even tell you about my finances. I didn't even tell you about my scholarship. It's too late. You missed your opportunity. When they asked you, what are you going to do in the US? That was the time that you had to give them your evidence. So once they've made that decision, they've clicked a button that is going to take them too much time for them to undo, and they're not going to do it for you. They're not going to tell you why you were refused because they have no responsibility to. They're not going to spend the time on it. They will probably just tell you, look at this piece of paper. It's going to tell you something generic. They may tell you, because you don't have ties, they're going to tell you something simple. They're almost never going to tell you the exact reason. I would say in my time doing visas, I, in very rare occasions, would actually take the time to tell someone what their situation was, just because I felt like this person didn't know what was going on and why they were encountering this wall in their visa path. And they were applying over and over, and there was something that was never going to be overcome. And so then I might take the time to tell them why they couldn't overcome this, right? Instead of just refused and go. But honestly, I think I was probably a little bit more benevolent than the average consular officer. And you can't rely on a visa officer doing that for you. So you probably will not be able to ask them. Unfortunately, we as consular officers, we know when we hear a story, we know from our experience, doing visas ourselves, listening to our colleagues, we know what it was when we hear that, but you're probably not going to know just from interpreting the interview. Because Mandy, we do have a lot of clients that they think they know why they were refused, and it's because they were refused right after they were asked a specific question.
Yeah.
But that's not really how it works, right?
It really isn't. And usually there's multiple reasons for someone being denied a visa. It's usually not just one specific factor, which is what people tend to think it is. And I would say that, visa officers, they actually can explain, they just choose not to. And actually, as a young visa officer, when I first started on the line, I used to tell people why they were denied. And then you immediately realize the mistake in doing that, because as soon as you start giving reasons, then people start arguing with you, or they'll say, well, you didn't really understand my situation. Can you please give me another chance? I have more documents to show you. And just like Ben said, at that point, the visa officer has already made a decision, which is final. They're not interested in arguing with you. And they've realized that the easiest way to get you to leave their window and exit is by giving you a letter and saying, hey, I can't approve your visa. And this letter will explain why. And the letter doesn't say anything, of course.
Yeah, that letter is going to tell you that it's 214B, that you didn't overcome the presumption of immigrant intent, which is just the standard refusal for anyone that they just don't feel comfortable giving a visa to. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's a good question for you, Mandy. Does not being confident affect the interview? How do I appear more confident?
Wow, this is a great question. And not being confident absolutely affects the interview. I like to say that confidence is probably 50% of the battle, perhaps even more. And in order to be confident, you have to know what to expect, and you have to know how a visa officer is going to look at your case. What are they going to focus on? What are going to be the most important things for them and what questions might come up? I think oftentimes visa applicants are not prepared for the visa interview. They get a question, they're like deer in headlights, or they don't know how to answer. And that hesitation or lack of confidence will lead them to getting their visas denied. Now, if you're prepared, if you know what is going to come up, if you can be truthful and yet give an answer that fully satisfies the visa officer, then you can get that visa approved. And that's what we do at Argo.
Okay, let's move on to another question. Can you give an example of strong ties to your home country if the applicant doesn't have any property or land? A good example of this is, well, they're not going to ask, the visa officer is never going to ask you, what are your ties to your home country? I've never asked that question. Mandy, have you ever asked that question?
No, they're not specific like that.
That's not a question that you're ever going to be asked. However, every question that they do ask is related to this concept of ties to your home country, what's going to lead you to return to your home country after you study, right? And so if you don't have property or land, right, then, well, what is going on, right? Do you have a job offer when you return to your country? Some people that are going for master's degrees, they have a job that is supporting them as they go, and they have a job waiting for them when they return. Some people have their family, their entire family, maybe their elderly parents who are in the country, and they're responsible for taking care of them. Maybe culturally, it's unique to your country where, you know, some member of the family will need to be there to be with the parents to take care of them. Whatever it is, it's the ties to the country. It's not so explicit as like this one thing is a tie to the country. The ties to the country represent the feeling that the officer has that they can trust that you're going to return to the country, right? That can be as much as, yeah, I think this is a good student. They seem to be a really good student, and that they're going to do what they say. That can be enough, right? Without having any property, income, whatever reasons are associated with a tie. You don't have to have any of that. It just has to be that feeling. Okay. Mandy, I've been rejected in 2014 for a tourist visa, visitor's visa, B1, B2, let's assume. How's that going to affect me when I apply for an F1? Will it have an effect?
It will definitely have an effect. And there will already be notes in the computer system about your prior refusal. And so you're going to you might be indirectly asked about that. Or the visa officer may ask questions to try to understand what has changed in your situation. So definitely be prepared to explain, changes. And especially if this was back in 2014, that's a long time ago. So I'm sure you might have changed careers. You might have, maybe you're growing your family, all sorts of things. And those will be important to highlight when you go in for your interview.
Okay. Is it true that a decision is already made even before you attend the interview? The answer to that is a definite no. We get this question all the time. I know the rumors are out there. I know that sometimes, a lot of our readers and viewers, they contradict what we say and say that's not true. That's not what everybody says on the internet. Well, those people on the internet are just random people on the internet. We are former visa officers. You can look at our credentials. We have them on our website, our diplomas, our consular commissions, our diplomatic commissions. You can look in the senatorial record where we were confirmed as foreign service officers, diplomats of the United States of America, and also as consular officers. You can look up our credentials and you can trust what we tell you because we've actually been on the inside. And when I tell you that the decision is not made before your interview, you can trust this. In fact, in 99.9% of cases, the visa officer has never looked at your case before you arrive at the interview. They take your passport and they scan that barcode and they start looking at your application. No one has looked at the case before that in 99.9% of cases. And so, yes, you are the 99.9%. Don't give me the question, well, what's the 0.01%? That doesn't apply to you. Trust me. These are random cases. That's basically just saying anything can happen. However, the standard way that is going to apply to every single one of you is that you're going to submit your application, you're going to get an interview date, you're going to show up at that window, and that is the first moment that you have ever entered that visa officer's mind. When they see you standing behind the applicant that they're already interviewing, they see you standing behind that applicant, they're already starting to subconsciously form an opinion about you. Everything goes into play there. Your demeanor, your dress, the way you speak, your confidence, your posture, the way the way that you filled out your DS-160, the way that you're responding to the consular officer's questions, everything is going into affecting whether or not they feel that they want to give 214B or issue your visa, right? And they're trying to get there as fast as they possibly can. Sometimes people think that a decision has already been made, and it's because the visa officers make a decision so rapidly, right? Now, having done tens of thousands of these visa interviews, you get very good at what you're doing. If you've done anything 10,000 times, you get very good at it, let alone 60,000 or 100,000 times. So you get very good at scanning that DS-160 extremely quickly for important pieces of information that you know you're going to be considering, for asking pointed questions that you know from what you've already gleaned from the DS-160, what else do you want to know to build a better mental model of this applicant, right? You're trying to get maybe 2-3 data points that are going to support your decision to issue or refuse the visa, and then you make that decision and move on. That's the way that the managers force the visa officers to work. There's time constraints. It's not just the managers. It's because there are so many applicants and so few resources. They have to go quickly like that. And so, yes, they're moving quickly, but they are reading your information in real time, asking you questions, interpreting it, and then making a decision. There's no, they don't get a note saying, hey, refuse this person. That's not how it works. Okay. Mandy, why the visa officer rejects just after asking 1 or 2 questions without listening to the applicant's answer properly?
Okay, I love this question because I actually made a video about this specifically. I would say that the first question that the visa officer asks you is the most important question, and your response to it, because that sets the tone for your entire interview. Visa officers are on a time crunch. They have to interview a lot of people. So they're always looking for those fast approvals and fast denials. And so when they ask you that first question and they listen to your response, they're going to have this urge to either deny you right away, or maybe they're like, oh, that was a great answer, approve you right away. And so you definitely want to be in the category of people that they want to approve right away. And, you say without listening to applicants answer properly, they're listening to your first response, and that's going to be important. At Argo, we really believe that you take a very proactive approach. So again, at least in my consultations, I don't know about you, Ben, but I feel like we practice the first question a bunch of times because you really want to start off on the right foot with the visa officer.
Yeah, this is one of those things. They only ask 1 or 2 questions. Well, the lesson that everyone should take away from this is that they may only ask 1 or 2 questions. And so you have to be ready. You need to know what your highlights are. And in that 1 or 2 responses that you have, you've got to get your information out there. Because if the decision is made and you're sent away from the window, refused, and you never even presented your strong information, it's your responsibility. I don't want to use the word fault, but it's definitely your responsibility, because they're going to let you speak at some point. They will let you speak. Maybe not for a long time if you go on forever, but they will definitely let you speak, and that's your opportunity. That's the chance. You only know that you're going to be asked 1 question. That's one thing that you can be guaranteed when you go to a visa interview, and you have to be ready to take full advantage of the time that you are given to answer that 1 question. And you don't have to just answer what they ask. If they say, oh, you're from Honduras, you don't have to just say yes. Let's say you're applying in Mexico. You don't just say, yes, I'm from Honduras. Well, they already know you're from Honduras. They asked you the question because they saw your passport. So the question in their mind is, oh, you're not from Mexico, you're from somewhere else. What's the reason you're here in Mexico applying for a visa? So the answer to, oh, you're from Honduras is, yeah, actually, I'm here in Mexico because I've been studying university here for the last 3 years, and now I've been accepted into the university in the U.S. I actually got a full scholarship. I've got all the documents here for you if you want to see it. All of a sudden, they've got a bunch of good information. why are you in Mexico? What are you doing in the US? And hey, look, you've got scholarships. So you've got to take advantage. You're your only advocate in there. You have to take advantage. Okay. I've been accepted to a master's with a teaching assistantship. But when I was 9, I went to the US and overstayed. So an underage overstay who's now trying to go back to the US for an F visa. How should they approach this?
Gosh, okay. So if you have a complication in your history, I would say to not shy away from what happened, because it's possible that there's information in there that the visa officer already knows. One of the things that really peeves a visa officer is if there is a serious situation like an overstay or an arrest or something, but the visa applicant isn't forthcoming and doesn't bring it to the officer's attention. If the officer realizes it during the interview, then they're going to think, wow, this person was hoping that I didn't notice, or was hoping that I just would miss it. And that doesn't really, give them a very good impression of you and whether or not you're a credible person that can be trusted. So if you're someone that has a complication, you want to bring it up right away, address it head on, directly, explain it in a way that is easy to understand. But it's delicate, right? Because this is something that you've done before. Perhaps you've broken the law, even if it was not your own fault, and you're going to want to be prepared to defend that. And I would say that if you're someone in this situation, don't just wing it and hope that it makes sense. Definitely try to work with someone first, because you just want to make sure that it's coming out the right way and you're being heard correctly by the visa officer.
Absolutely. And that's what we can do. We're going to wrap it up now. This has been a great hour of questions with you, but that's what we can do. All of these situations that you're in are very unique to you. We can give general information to you. We can give you tips that we know apply to most people, but we can't identify your specific highlights and your hurdles and your advantages and disadvantages just in this format. That's why Mandy and I and our team of over 20 ex-visa officers who have served in over 35 countries around the world and speak 14 different languages dedicate our time to doing one-on-one consultations with you to help you identify what's the best way to maximize your chances of getting a visa. There's no one else that can do it like we can. We are the ex-visa officers who are behind the window making those decisions. We have the expertise and the knowledge in the regulations that have to be fulfilled in order to get these visas. But even more importantly, we know the thinking of the visa officers, and we know what affects their thinking and what's going to lead them towards issuing and what might lead them towards not issuing. So follow us on YouTube, on Facebook. We have a group on Facebook that's very active with people exchanging information back and forth about their visa journey. On TikTok, on Instagram. Go to our website, argovisa.com. Send us an email at hello@argovisa.com. We have a bot which is designed with the ex-visa officer's knowledge to help you assess your chances of getting approved for your visa. You can check that out at bot.argovisa.com. Anyone that completes that bot during this week will be entered into a raffle to get a free consultation. So be sure to check that out. Take the bot, take the assessment, get entered into that raffle, and reach out to us if we in any way can help you with your visa journey.
We really look forward to helping you and be successful in your visa journey. And thanks so much for spending time with us, asking all of your great questions. I hope our tips and insights were helpful to you today. And, if we didn't answer your specific question, you can send us an email at hello@argovisa.com, or just go straight to argovisa.com and book a consultation. And we really look forward to helping you be successful on your visa journey.
Great. So like and subscribe to our channel. Also, para los que hablan español, mañana vamos a hacer un live con preguntas y respuestas en español para todos los hispanohablantes. Entonces, espero verte mañana. Thanks, everybody. We look forward to doing more of these in the future.